Hello. So I just was going to try to summarize, the past three videos where your child protectors and predators all look alike. Um, so the simplest solution seems to be just let families, kind of, raise their kids as they see fit. I think most people would, not do the weird stuff. I wouldn't even partake in that weird stuff. Now, like if I had like some teenage daughter or even, son, that ended up fucking an adult or something like that. Like at a Diddy party and they didn't get raped and they didn't get roofied. I would be kind of weird on even pressing charges on that. But maybe some discussions with the family would be in order. And yeah, so and then this kind of solves the trans issue. People could raise their kids to be trans. You don't need to partake in that. All right. I don't think I'm going to push that on any of my children, even if they want to be. So a little bit of control. Of course. And you don't need to raise your kids to get them circumcised and have some rabbi suck their penis and everything. And you should give the demons a place to fucking be, really, because you're going to have this. You can't get rid of the evil, you can't get rid of the light. But right now the evil is fucking corralling the light and really abusing the shit out of them. So if you guys just like open it up, then the people that are willing to do that, the people that are willing, oh, here, inject me with something, genetically modifying and breed me with a alien. You could find these people willingly. And it's just like, and I know, it doesn't satisfy everyone. Everyone wants to be like, no, you're child protection, and we're going to totally abuse people. We're going to be just like the evil of the world, but we're going to, mask it in child protection like they do with protecting others, like the other side does. And, it's just a bunch of shit. Just a bunch of shit. Like, look at yourselves. The child protective services is just child sex trafficking services. There's a lot of people that don't have the cognitive dissonance. There's already like you could find online like cheap like sex dolls and everything, and they're made small and cheaply, and they're like almost child size, and it's like, okay, well, why don't you make like a robot that like looks like an underager to like play with instead of a human? And people are like, no, no, no. It's like, this sounds like you just want problems. It sounds like you just want problems because I don't know. I don't know that person's history. Was he like sexually abused by a bunch of children? Not every child is fucking like an angel. Have you heard the stories of the black-eyed children and shit? Have you? You should check into that. But yeah, there's children of the corn in this world. There's everything, everything. So if you guys could better accommodate that with better management and whatnot and more reasonability, then yeah, and I think you guys get it mostly right. And I wouldn't, do these things like the evil things with, like with my children and everything. People have thank God you have raised kids, Chris, because yeah, no, like I would have gotten them vaccines. Actually, I would have put them into the brainwashing MK Ultra school system. I would have trusted people with my kids and everything, where I'm less trusting now. After realizing everything. And I would keep my kids way closer and my family way tighter than I had a child in my early adulthood. If I had a child in my early adulthood, they would have been totally brain damaged, given probably diseases and shit, because the poisons that they get injected with, and the foods that I would have improperly given them. And I know there's a lot of parents that are doing their best and everything. There's no instruction manual, and I don't mean to give you guys so much shit like in my last videos, okay? You guys are, doing your best, and you just don't know, and you're blind, and you just don't know what the fuck you're doing, and I get that. I really do. So, we're all doing our best here and whatnot, but, they're just something, there's a lot of stuff that you guys do, like that Valhalla VTF or VFT guy. He's all for that. Child slavery. Child slavery, as long as their special spots aren't touched. Go fucking destroy a children's childhood, a child's childhood in a different fashion. And evil is like, okay, so we can't touch them inappropriately, so let's do everything else. I'm not for your stupid capitalist shit either, because that's very harmful to children as well. Y'all like, yeah, capitalism, capitalism, capitalism. That's just more programming nonsense from everybody. I suffered from a lot of this shit too, and all these labels and shit. Candace Owens is like, no, we're not. I just saw it's the 2nd of December, so Candace Owens did a thing today, and she's like, we're not going to work for the dark forces. Good. I don't expect you guys to. Good. I'm kind of like a voice for both sides, and this is kind of like a war, and we're trying to, mediate the situation here, is what I'm doing, and it's, very difficult, so I think I've, come to the best conclusion for the best outcomes, there could possibly be. And yeah, they do it in Israel. Everyone's like, yeah, look at the pedals, they're all in Israel. Yeah, so then maybe that's the place where you guys should go. If you guys notice someone in your neighborhood, maybe you guys get him like a robot, that is, looks underage, or send them on a, paid trip to the Israel's hell, there, and then it's, more clean, less messy, more direct, more upfront. None of this eyes wide shut shit going on. Because, yeah, one of the things they did, is at the food bank of the Rockies, which I mentioned in my previous videos, and they brought someone in that looked like one of my exes, my first girlfriend, my very first girlfriend. We dated when we were 19, 20 years old. And they used that to, make me look bad, because everything's business is about appearance. It's about appearances, so, and like I like to head things off at the pass, where I feel that I was like, roofie raped in my 20s. And then, and then I suspect later that it was underagers, and they took photos of me and everything. And then, and yeah, it's just, just the appearances, Yeah, oh my God, you can Matt Gates me. You can Matt Gates me. I have a hard time with all the brain damage and everything people cause me, so I have this facial blindness. But there's also the argument, and I get that legitimate argument. They're like, well, Chris, the ones that we offer you, like our teenagers are have fresher eggs, because we're trying to get a child of God out of you, and you want your child to be healthy, because an older lady, even in my peer group, is, your eggs are exposed longer to all the poisons, and that's worse for any offspring that I have. So I get that argument too, but then you're really like immature, and I'm just going to have to, you like talk about like college girls. You're just really immature. I don't have a connection with you. It also seems, really greedy. Like there's no one closer to your peer group. Like, like I get, the whole child of God thing, right? Yeah. But there's no one closer to your peer group, to, hook up with. But yeah, I'm a spiritual entity, so they're, trying to do that too, and the U.S. Intel community that I was protesting at sex club, and there was that one worker that the owner that worked in U.S. Intel, and they're all protecting all the, child fuckers and everything. There seems to be a good percentage of people that are okay with it, even like Macron, the Candace Owens was giving him shit. He hooked up at 15 years old, just like my one friend, hooked up at 15. That's their business, yo. That's that family's business. There's like a standard I see in society, and in American society and everything, and that's fine and everything, but not everyone's going to follow that. Not everyone's going to follow that standard. You see a parent, sexually abusing their child. Or maybe, you get them that robot, and, the community could come together, and get them, a better alternative. Or, like, why don't you guys, like, move to, like, Israel's hell? Stuff like that, I'm not for the sex offender list, for the fact that it is a evil magic spell that you cast on them. And, just like telling someone they're a loser their whole fucking life. You're a loser, 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 loser. And then they end up being a loser. And it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. Just like I think this one guy, Mark, and everything, he did this documentary about child protective services and all that shit, and he's like, they got 100% failure rate, yo. And it's like, yeah, because you cast this magic spell on them, they're constantly reminded. And what do you guys fucking get your kids to dress like little sluts and bring them needlessly around these, targets and everything, and you have them feel themselves up and then feel their crotch up and everything, and bend over in front of them and whatnot, and you make sure they're on with a short skirt and everything when they bend over. Like, what the fuck's wrong with you? Sounds fucking stupid. All of it. And I'm just like, well, just be more like direct, and, you should give them a place over there, and you guys do your thing here, and, you could bridge the gap with, some of this stuff, like, some technology and silicone and everything, and maybe some AI interface, and, yeah, and I know it gets me a lot of shit talking for the light and the dark side. Yeah, it gets me a lot of shit. But there, and there's a bunch of child, like, eaters and everything, like, you straight up child eaters. Like, you guys really need to, if you guys are going to have an orphanage or anything, that needs to be, like, highly monitored. Like, the people from the community could come in, through the internet and monitor the cameras, and there should be cameras everywhere, except the bathrooms and locker rooms. I would say at the entrances at those places would be good, and the staff should definitely, have some body cameras that they upload, constantly, like cops. But you have easier access to the information. You don't need to do no FOIA request, and just, be a little more reasonable and everything, like that. And yeah, so then that kind of sums up my last three videos, really. I know people, they're going to be like, look at this predator and everything. It's like, no, I'm not. I'm just saying you should just, like, you guys go over there, do your thing. You guys go over here, do your thing. And people are like, fuck you. It's like, I'm really kind of done talking about this shit. I'm tired of talking about this stuff. I've made my points and everything, and there you go, yeah, not everyone likes it. People tried recruiting me into this, underage, trafficking network, but they eyes wide shut. And they're like, what are you talking about? You schizophrenic? You should see a therapist. And it's just, like, whatever. I guess I might be, greeting many of them into hell, one day. So yeah. I think that's a good summary of everything that I, have spoken about, and yeah, I know it's not really clean. It's a little bit messy, definitely gives rises for awkward situations, but I think it's a hell of a lot better than you're doing right now, because, yeah, they're all fucking using your children. They're all doing it behind your backs and everything. A lot of the children don't even know that they're victims, because they can't remember, and then they turn into an erring adult, and then they sick the child protectors on them just to misdirect, and I just, like, what the fuck y'all doing? And that's all. So yeah, if you want to check out my three previous videos, I'll put them in, in the description down below. But you guys could peace the fuck out. See ya. Of course, I gotta make an addition and everything, but yeah, I was saying, like, they offer me, like, really young ones and everything, and then inappropriately young ones, and then in a sense, the legal ones are still kind of inappropriate, because it's like, I don't have anything in common with you. Like, you're not part of my peer group. you're not an 80s 90 child, all right, and I would prefer someone in my peer group, and that does pose risk and everything. I hear, and all the angles and everything. So it just, yeah. So I would prefer that. But they sent me these lookalikes, of people, from my peer group or, not of my peer group. But, this one club sent me someone that I wasn't able to make it work with. And, many many years ago, and I felt rubbed wrong, because you're trying to emotionally manipulate me by getting someone that looks exactly like someone that I used to love. And well, I mean, still do. Does love ever really die? So anyway, um, and anyway, I didn't make it work with them, and they ended up getting married, and that's fine. I just wouldn't, I would have fucked up. I would have fucked up, had I got a child, when I was younger. And not in the way that some jerk offs would think, but I would have got them vaccines. I would have, put them in normal school. I would have had a unnatural birth at a hospital. They probably would have encouraged me and my lover to get on formula instead of breastfeeding, and just all sorts of mistakes. And another thing is that they like to poison, the people so much and your children so much that it maintains their youth a little longer. That's what I was saying in one of my three past videos, is that you're all maturing just a little bit slower. So where you guys would normally be like full grown adult at 15, 16 years old, you're not that, because you're so poisoned. And that's the upside for the evil they see it as. They're like, oh shit, we poison them and everything, and then they get to maintain their youth status a little bit longer. Yeah, that's how they see it. Or that's a good side effect of what they do. So just giving you information, I guess. I know it's all weird, but I think it's just best that you just kind of let families, raise their children as they see fit with more reason than you do today, and then that a lot of your problems are solved right there. Just yeah, yeah, I know you can't control other people. Oh my god, holy fucking shit. You maybe just worry about your family, because there's a lot of angles here of shit that you're fucking up on that you may not have, thought about, that, you've thought about seeing my video. So, yeah, or seeing my videos. So, yeah, just, I would raise my children like, Tucker Carlson or Candace, Owens would raise their children. Although, the God of the Bible is a fucking demon and everything. So, y'all, there's a lot of good stuff in the Bible. It's more like gods anyway. God is more, the actual God is like gods. And you see this with the Chinese AI. Chinese AI kind of designed it over the gods and everything, and they made it way more efficient and whatnot. And then there's the psychopath demon cosplaying God, the one God, this one God, and they made their AI on it. But when China did it, like, we're going to have a bunch of different, AIs, and have their specialty, right? And then when the user queries, it's going to, refer to one of those, AIs or more, one or more of those AIs for the inquiry. But the psychopath Western version of AI is like, no, there's this one and it knows everything. But you see, the Chinese made it like 50%, or 50 times more efficient, than the psychopath bullshit, view of the cosplayers of God. Look at that. So yeah, yeah, I wouldn't be taking my kids to school. I definitely. I thought. I mean, how is putting body cameras on your kids if you need to leave them with strangers or something? Is this something you guys could do? And definitely call into question, if there's no footage and whatnot. If the footage was tampered with or something, it was shut off. Yeah, could you guys, put something, like, Give it to your child and make it hard to get off, um, or not. I don't know. Would that put the child in danger or something? If it's hard to get off. I have my cats the slip away collar, or yeah. So anyway, just an idea that kind of popped into my head. Yeah, not just the teachers or something, or at a daycare or orphanage, but maybe your own children should have some technology that could help protect them, or I hope. There's a because I'm involved in this shit. They got the Princess Diana cameras to disappear. The footage. They did that in Jeffrey Epstein. They just have a knack of but that's your clue right there. If the footage is gone, then something happened. Then something occurred, and then you could go from there. Especially healing your child. Maybe they got possessed during that. Moment where like, oh, I don't know what happened, the footage be gone, and I don't know, and they do their eyes wide shut shit, right? So yeah, I'm for protecting the children, and I'm for the Zionists, doing their weird shit too. They because that's it's going to occur, so might as well give them a place to do it, and that's like the best place, right? So whenever I see people, they're like the pedophilic state of Israel, or people are like, look, all the pedos are there, and it's like, yeah, I mean, man, I can't think of a better place for them to fucking be, except they shouldn't be in Palestine. We should find them, some place. They got a lot of money, I guess. They could go buy some land, somewhere like the tip of Argentina, or the tip of Florida. And the upside of that, if they are in the United States, at least y'all have free healthcare and education, right? If they like legit, chop off the tip of Florida and make it the 51st state, then you guys will have free healthcare and college, right? There's that. So anyway, I just like to think things out, talk things out, and it's kind of like you're in the middle of a huge war, and here's the mediation. All right. And look, I wanted to also make the point. There's like a lot of Satanists out there that actually act like the stereotypical Christians. I know this eyes wide shut shit going on too, right? I mean, it's just so messy with the labels. And there's a lot of Christians that are acting like the stereotype version of Satanists. So it's just, what are you doing? I'm still for that stewardship of America. I think I could really help a lot of you out in the world with that better than I can being like a bitch, like a deep state bitch. I would have been had I kept going on the president, running for president path that I was on. And I'm unable to meet those hidden requirements for being president. I thought it was just like 35 years or older, must have lived in, the United States, past 14 years and be a natural born citizen. But they're like, no, you gotta like eat, and fuck our children. And those are the two hidden requirements that I just can't make. So I had to figure out a different path. So you could make your own conclusions of how harmful and predatory I could be, because there is that going on too. Because I'm not for a total war either. So I like I said, I got some shit to talk about some Satanists. I got some shit to talk about some Christians. And then we could maybe achieve this balance. This balance they got. With the Freemason symbol that they should probably just get rid of, because it doesn't really seem balanced, does it? But anyway, yeah. So anyway, peace the fuck out. I wanted to add that shit in. Well, I just wanted to tack onto this video some more before the night is over. So they do their little offerings and everything, and then they pivot to be like, no, we're just like child protecting, and we obviously got to dress our daughter like a slut, or you have your dudes do it too, but dress her like a slut and have her feel herself around, have her feel herself up around, whatever target, and it's like this pivot, that they do, where it does make it hard to tell who's who. and what's what. And there's people that are like, oh my God, there's like all of them in Hollywood. No, I mean, they might be cult members and everything. I don't think it's everybody in Hollywood. They obviously Michael Jackson me, so they did this to Michael Jackson, and then they're like, look, Mike Jackson, he's the pedo, and they did the same thing to Robin Williams, and I think Jackson is still alive. Good for him. And Robin Williams, like he was probably going to say something and disclose some like really dark shit, and then he ended up suiciding. And yeah, so I don't think it's everyone in Hollywood. People are definitely aware of it at some point. I was getting steered towards Hollywood, in my early 20s, my young adult years. So and I had no idea. Like I worked at many pizza places and I just had no idea. It's like the one group leaves me out and excludes me. But that will include my lovers or past loves of mine. So I noticed, like I would get that feeling, and people be like, oh, well, it's just like schizophrenia or like normal jealousy or whatever. But no, they were doing weird sexual things with my lovers, all of them, because they're doing their weird cult stuff. And then I'm supposed to like be inclusive after being excluded like all my life, right? So it ain't no biggie that I self pleasure myself because I don't want to be beholden to the cult and everything. Like they're like, yeah, come on down to an orgy, and it's like and then it's like, yeah, I really need this or some sort of mindset like I need that. And I still stick by a statement I said years ago when I was trying to join that sex club, where I mentioned in the series of videos here, the past three, that I'd show up and just like fuck myself and go, and I stand by that. Because then people don't have power and control over me. So isn't that good? Isn't that a good thing? To not be manipulated, right? Or not. I mean, people are like, oh my God, and there's, I guess, good sex parties and bad sex parties. So I'd like to go to one of the good ones, please. Thank you. I might be a little neutral, but I lean, towards the light side, so, but it gets really murky. There's a lot of Satanists that act like the stereotype, of Christians, and a lot of Christians that act like the stereotype of Satanists. So get really, confusing who's who and what's what. Yeah, I do suspect it's the underage sex trafficking network that raped me the other day. And it's just who else, would bring people around that look like past loves of mine. Not only they did that at the food bank with, my first girlfriend, they had this other church reach out to me, Thrive Church, and had this Angie Lopez fucking that looked like an older version of Hikmete, and it was like two people that looked, very similar. One the way I used to remember her when I was younger, and one when she was like older. That's not no coincidence. That was planned. That was some intelligence agency bullshit. Trying to emotionally manipulate me, make me look bad, and then but also you're trying to like recruit me too. But then you do the pivot, right? So it just gets really annoying really quick, and then I'm not able to volunteer anymore. At that one place, and it's not like like I really don't feel like handing out poisonous foods laced with poison foods to people. I'd rather give them good food, healthy food, and that's a very rare thing in these parts of the empire. So yeah, it's not like that big of a loss, but still, like, I would like to volunteer somewhere, but oh, you're just going to like bring people that like look like past exes and loves of mine, and you're going to all, like a bunch of dicks, So yeah, so they do that pivot thing, and it makes it kind of hard to fucking tell, right? So, and the only thing I could do is just kind of like talk about it, right? Right? So, and that's what I'm doing, and that's what I've been doing, and such. So, yeah, you guys have a lovely night, or morning, or day. All right, peace the fuck out.